Hi, I'm Rawson Gulick. I'm a wealth advisor here at Willow Creek Wealth Management. Over the past few years, I've explored the work of George Kinder and his approach to financial planning, which really goes deeper into the heart's core of what drives people to find and live their dream of freedom. I've read a few of his books, joined a conversation circle of sorts, and I thought that the Willow Creek community would also enjoy and be energized by his work. So I had the opportunity to have a conversation with George, which I'm bringing to you today. He talks about his dream of freedom, and in financial planning, what we really want is for someone who will listen to us and then help us put our life together in a way that helps us flourish. So I hope you enjoy the conversation.
I came out of college. I went to Harvard, so I went to some really great schools, a great high school, a great college, and I loved it. I loved all the learning. I loved being with my peers. It was incredibly exciting in the 1960s. That was when I was there, and so all the drama of that era was there, and a lot of fun. And then when I came out, I think. For the first time, I realized that even though I'd felt this incredible freedom at college and in the 60s, I felt in some way that my education had narrowed my experience of freedom. That in some way, and so I came out like bursting with this desire, this passion to be free. And that played out in the 1970s and 80s. I was not born with a silver spoon in my mouth. I had to earn a living, and I had to figure out how. But what my passion really was at that time, I thought, what does it mean to be free? I want to be free, and it had something to do with nature, being in nature. It had something to do with living a wildly creative life. And it had a great deal as well to do with spirit and with a touching, um, we now think mindfulness accumulates a lot of our thoughts about spiritual things in the press and for me as well, but so meditative activity. So in the 70s and 80s, I had to make a living. And so I actually went back to graduate school in accounting because I figured I could at least do tax returns just a few months out of the year and then be free the rest of the year. And how cool that would be. So I placed a lot more emphasis at that time on freedom in here than on external freedom, than on accumulating the money that would make me free. I began but I began to understand that there was a relationship between the two, and that I needed a certain amount of money to be able to make that freedom happen. So one of the things I think very relevant to your career and my career as well is that as I was doing the tax returns, I realized that learning about money really gave me a possibility of actually plotting out how I could have the freedom that I really longed for, that I really wanted. And so that's what I did. I went back after doing a few years of just tax returns. Well, I also noticed that my clients were having the same dilemma as me. They might not have wanted a spiritual life. They might not have wanted a wildly creative life, but they weren't doing what they wanted to do with their life. That was really clear. Client after client would come in, and I'd ask them because I was curious. And all of them said no, they began to get tied down by their mortgages, tied down by their station wagons, tied down by their families, and the expectations of the society around them, of their employers, of their partners, their spouses. So I that really was the beginning of life planning. I think of it as financial life planning, and it was beginning of that because I was recognizing that I could learn how to put the financial pieces together to deliver myself that freedom, and then possibly other people. So I went back and got a certified financial planner designation, and launched a financial planning business. I don't know if that's exactly where you wanted me to go, Rawson, but
No, that's exactly right. I think thinking about freedom and your search so young for freedom, my sort of search for freedom came much later. And I too found this as a real path to find that dream of freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, incredible. And incredible what we can deliver. I mean, it used to be that financial advisors were pretty much stockbrokers,
Yeah.
right? And they'd be selling product. And if they're good, they get to know you, and usually they're friends with you. They might play golf or tennis with you, or have a meal at a nice restaurant with you. But they were their friendship was, it was pretty cool, but it was also more superficial than what,
Yeah.
it didn't really lead to freedom. And that's what I realized, was that there was a way of listening to people and listening to myself to begin with, and then devising from a vision that came out of that, of what freedom looked like for the
Yeah.
person, a path to it.
And I love that you say listening to yourself. That's part of what you teach, is really, you must listen in the room to what the client's saying and maybe what the undertones are, but also listening inside yourself about what's coming up for you, maybe where you're finding some blockage there as well.
Absolutely. Uh, great, the great financial planners are not the great stockbrokers. They're,
Yeah.
first of all, a great financial planner, you think of them as being holistic, as having many aspects to what they do, and they understand all the facets of money. But the best of all of those are the best listeners.
Yeah.
And the best listeners among all of those very frequently will have a significant mindfulness practice, some kind of
Yeah.
practice that brings them right here, right now. And that means, and that kind of listening, we don't talk about it always in this way, but it really is listening to ourselves. And what you're talking about, the blockages, those blockages are blockages to our being right here.
Yeah.
So in mindfulness, we just simply let them go, let them go, let them go. And that forms a practice that brings a certain kind of freedom to us.
Yeah. I wrote a quote down that I wanted to bring to your attention. Let me see where that is. Hmm. Every person would love to have a mentor, a great listener, a kind, thoughtful, and knowledgeable professional. They would love to have a conversation with someone like this, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. What could be more wonderful than that?
Yeah.
And for that person to be at any professional they meet, but more than any professional, is the professional that really knows money,
Yeah.
because money is where it all happens for us. It's how we pay for things, it's how we earn, it's how, it has to do with everything in society. There's a linkage. And what happens is that society's made money into a god, but that's not what we want. And what we want is someone who listens and then helps us to put our life together in a way where money enables it to flourish.
Yeah.
What an incredible thing to have a friend like that, to have a mentor. Uh, Yeah,
And I think also on the other side, you can be in danger of stepping too far away from the money. So how is money also important when you're thinking about mindfulness?
well, I think that they are they are separate but interrelated. There's so many ways to think about mindfulness. Mindfulness, even as we think money touches everything, mindfulness has the capacity to touch many more things than money does. Money facilitates our ability to practice mindfulness, our time, our having time. Um, so it's very important there. The other thing that I've found from years and years of meditation is that in every way I'm better at things. I have more energy. I have I mean, I'll tell you a personal story from just recent times. And that is, I was one of the first people in America to get COVID.
Mm.
And I got it on a plane flying from San Francisco over to Maui, where I spend a good deal of my years. And someone from Santa Clara County was sitting next to me, and they coughed all over me the whole
Uh,
time. So I arrived there. It was for Christmas vacation, just before
wow.
the whistleblower
Yeah.
in Wuhan, Dr. Lee, blew the whistle in China. And I arrived there, and 2 or 3 days later, I got a terrible cold, and 2 or 3 days after that, I was diagnosed with pneumonia. They didn't have a clue what COVID was, and I was way out in the outback where we live, in this tiny little town called Hana. And so there was no blood test. There, just it's hard. I don't want to put down the doctor there, but they just didn't have the
Nobody
equipment,
knew. Yeah.
and nobody knew. But I was diagnosed with pneumonia, and um, and a week later, after medication, pneumonia was gone. I was told I never recovered my energy.
Mm.
I lost tremendous amount of energy, and so I had this deep fatigue, and you see it as part of long COVID. So I'm I'm not placing exactly your question again. It's not. I hope this isn't part of my brain fog from it. But the what happened was I realized that life has its um, unpredictable nature to it.
Yeah.
And I thought there are things that I still have to do that I want to do, that I'm passionate about. And so even though my energy level had dropped by more than half, maybe by as much as 2/3, in the next 2.5 years, I produced 5 books.
Yeah. Wow.
And they were the books I'd really want. They were the books that I felt would be my legacy that I really wanted to do. And they're the books of poetry and photography.
Yeah.
It's yet another topic.
Yeah.
So very important.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And
Yeah.
I understand that you're feeling better now, after especially just having been in Hawaii.
Oh gosh, yes, that always helps.
That's great.
But the no the fatigue, I'm not sure it'll ever go away. I'm probably at about half speed from where I was. But it doesn't matter so much to me because all that time that I'm fatigued, I'm actually doing meditative work.
Yeah.
So I don't I'm not missing a beat.
That's great.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
great. Well, I want to get into some of these bigger topics, but it would not be a conversation with you without you please doing us the honor of bringing the three questions to this audience.
Yeah.
You do such a beautiful job of it, and it would be our honor to hear you talk about these three important questions of life planning.
Great. And I will say that they've been an inspiration to me.
Yeah.
I go back and revisit them periodically, and it's one of the reasons that I think I was successful during this period where I had great fatigue,
Yeah.
because I just got passionate about that. I've got to accomplish this. So I designed these. I began to design these in the 80s. I really designed them in the 80s. Coming out, I'd gotten my certified financial planner designation. And I knew that I wanted to help my client base bring a focus first and foremost to who they most wanted to be. Too many advisors have their ladders, as they say,
Yeah.
on the wrong wall.
Yeah.
And it's like, how much money do you need? Like, as if the client knows. And the client comes up with a figure and then they go for it in some way. And they talk a little bit about the family and all this, but I want to know who they really want to be. And then I want to figure out how can we get there in the most efficient and rapid way for everybody. So I knew that the way to do this was to create a process of engagement or listening to the client where I was listening more and more to them talk about who they really wanted to be. So questions often help, and I came up with these three questions. And the first of them is necessary because it's kind of winning the lottery, going to Disneyland for the first time when you're a kid. You have all the money that you need for the rest of your life. You suddenly wake up and realize this. And the question is, if you knew that, maybe you're not as rich as Elon Musk or Warren Buffett or somebody, but if you knew that you had all the money you needed for the rest of your life, how would you spend your life? How would you spend your time? What would you do? And that question is is rich with all the things, it's the bucket list, right? It's the things that we want, it's the travel that we've wanted to do, all those things come up. But a lot comes into that. And it's wonderful to kind of loosen up and see, these are the possibilities for my life. I could go in many of these different directions. I don't have all the money I need. You never know what will happen, but these are the directions I could go. How wonderful. So that's the first question. If you don't do that first question and you're an advisor, the client might be a little wary of connecting with you, because the next two questions are far more personal. The second question is, you go to the doctor doing a normal checkup of, but the doctor's been doing some tests, and and she surprises you with the notion, with the disappointment that you have had a rare ailment, and she's failed to diagnose it. And you have only 5 to 10 years left to live. A minimum of 5 years, a maximum of 10. You'll last at least 5 years, but you won't make it to the 10th. So the question is, knowing that, what would you do with your life? Right?
Yeah.
And I don't know how the questions have hit you. For most people, that second question brings a lot of relationship themes up. It may be their kids, their friendships, their family, all the different things that connect to our hearts.
Yeah.
Now that's not true for everybody. There are many different ways it can go, but relationship and family is huge. It's probably the number one thing that comes out of these questions. So you've begun to narrow and get down to what's really important. These are more important things than that smattering of things where you won the lottery and you had all the money, right?
Yeah.
And the third one goes even deeper.
Yeah.
And it's set up the same way as the first, but it's not the same question. So you go to the doctor again and again. The doctor shocks you this time with the news that you've been misdiagnosed. You have a rare ailment and it has come to term. You have 24 hours left to live. The question is not what you would do at the time. The question is, what did you miss? Reflecting on all the things you'd anticipated doing, what did you miss? Who did you not get to be? What did you not get to do?
It's a tough question.
Yeah. Deep. It's deep.
Yeah.
And it can go in multiple ways with clients. The majority of clients will hear it and they'll reflect and they'll put down, if they're writing, or they'll express it verbally, the things that are deepest to them. And there'll be a recognition that this is what's important. This is really what I should be after right now. That's the way the majority will go. And then there's a smaller group that will feel a little depressed about it and won't know exactly where to go. And the function of the advisor is to empathize and bring their spirits up. So that's really quite profound. A very, very, very small group of people won't be able to answer it. Maybe they've just gotten a diagnosis that they're fearful about. And but for a life planner, the responses to those questions become the basis for the financial plan, because they're the life and death questions. These are the questions that if you don't deliver on them, your legacy has not been delivered into the world. You've missed being who you're meant to be.
Yeah. It's interesting. You asked how the questions land on me. I love doing these questions. I love the ideal day, ideal year. These three questions are very interesting. And for me, the first answer to the first question is I would immediately come to evoke training.
Ah,
And I think that it's interesting because what you said about the third question and the folks that really struggle with that, I do struggle with that question.
yeah.
I find that most of the responses that come out of me are about others, are about not sitting next to my mother on her deathbed and, carrying her to the next, or not being able to be the wife that I want to be when we get old and really caring for my husband, those types of things. And so I think maybe the evoke training and getting life planned will be really helpful to me to really find out within me what that is that needs to come out, and not necessarily about how I am with others.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear. Ross, as I've been thinking about this, I've been going, oh, I want to see Rawson at a 5-day at the Evoke training.
Yeah,
So
it's
4-day.
on my short list. It's
That's so
definitely
cool. That's
soon,
so cool.
soon.
And right on, it is something, and those, you get responses that are challenging. Sometimes it's about something that's absolutely impossible, like a child has died
Yeah,
and they regret not being able to live further with that child. So similarly, as you're talking about your mom and not being able to be there for her, perhaps on her deathbed, or not being able to be the spouse that you want to be,
mm,
those things mean that your mom and your spouse are very significant figures in the vision of your life plan. So they become part of that life plan, maybe not the whole thing.
yeah,
I suspect not at all the whole thing, but very significant part. And so, although you might not be able to be there on her deathbed if this terrible thing were to happen, you will feel so much better because you've been able to spend the time with her to give her that love and to learn from her
yeah,
what she has to give as well.
yeah, yeah. Thanks for the reflection.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with author Bruce Feiler? He's
No,
written he's written a couple of books that I've read recently. One that really I think is very uh, adjacent to your method is called Life is in the Transitions.
oh,
And
cool.
really, he did a study where he went all around the country and interviewed people about their significant transitions in life and what those catalysts were. And I wonder, uh, to really do this deep inquiry, does someone, a client or someone, have to have a catalyst to be able to go that deep? I wonder.
Well, I think that is something that makes it happen in a way. I mean, I
Yeah,
certainly see people who suddenly open up, and it's from that kind of experience. Some of the very best um, life planners in our community, it's surprising. Some of them are very young.
yeah,
And almost always, when they are very young, something deep and profound and often tragic
mm,
happened in their life, in their teenage or 20-year period of time. And they've had to mature very fast. And that maturity has taught them a lot about the meaning of life and ultimately who they really are as human beings. And it's also taught them an ability to listen more
mm,
to the sorrows that might be there. Because clients come in and they could be full of secret hidden
yeah,
aspirations and inspirations, or they could be filled with a secret sorrow in some way that normally they wouldn't share with a financial person. So the ability to listen can be helped by those kind of transitions. They're not necessary, but you see great growth coming out of them.
yeah, yeah. I just wondered that. Um, so again, I think that as financial people, often we think of things in one way, and your methods really bring it down to the authenticity and the the really who we really are. And I wonder if you could say a moment, say something on risk, because when we put our financial services hats on and we talk about risk and what's your risk tolerance and what's your risk capacity, but I think risk really means something else. What's
Right.
the biggest risk in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, it was phenomenal when I came to that because, like you, I mean, one of the things you study, if you're going to be a great financial advisor, you're studying risk all the time, and you're studying it enormously around portfolio construction and thinking about all the different layers of risk and certainly yeah, all the insurance aspects as well. But it came to strike me, I mean, it was astonishing when I realized this, that the greatest risk we face is not living into our life plan.
Yeah,
And who can make that happen better, more efficiently, more quickly than a financial planner, a financial
yeah,
life? So it's not the risk of losing our assets. It's not the risk of volatility in our economic circumstance. The greatest risk we face is that we don't become the person we were meant to be. That's it.
yeah,
And that's why you want, in fact, it's necessary to have a financial life planner to do your work.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a great segue, I think, into talking about a golden civilization.
Yeah.
And when you think about those great risks and not really being able to live the life you want to live, and you took this life planning method and you applied it to a broader, bigger concept. And it happened just after the great financial crisis. Would you say something about your reaction to that and how you came to write this book, A Golden Civilization and a Map of Mindfulness?
Yeah. It's funny that it started then because in a lot of ways we think about the great tumult that has happened in our society as being even more recent than that with the political
Yeah,
polarization that has occurred. But in fact, for me, it started with the banking crisis and feeling an outrage really that it had happened and that so many people had suffered from it. And it made me think, for years, Ross, and I have, as you well know, I've been an artist all along. I've been a poet and I was a painter in the early days, a photographer. And um, uh, and I've always I've always said, well, that's where I'm headed. That's where I'm headed. Well, and I thought that was where I was just going to be retiring, and so the banking crisis comes along and I get really ticked off. I'm really upset. How could this happen in this country, in this world?
yeah,
How could things fall apart that much? And I thought, I've failed.
mm,
My life planning movement has failed. I didn't do the work I wanted to do. I was meant to do. I wanted to make things all right. I wanted to make a really flourishing world. And it struck me, and has always struck me, that it's time for that to occur. So when the banking crisis occurred, I went back to the books, so to speak. I said, nope, you're not getting off and going and finishing your poetry and all that. You got to write one more book of economics. And you've got to really put on the old economic thinking hat. I minored in economics at Harvard, and rethink how we think about economics so that in fact that kind of situation just wouldn't happen. And so that we would have a civilization that we would always and constantly be proud of, be thrilled with,
yeah,
be feel that it was just incredible that all the world's people were coming alive with great spirit and energy and connectedness. And how would that happen using all the great things that we've learned in our market system in capitalism and since the Industrial Revolution. So anyway, I put that thinking cap back on and spent almost a decade, certainly many years, kind of writing and rewriting. And several books came out of it. Another book in the life planning field, but um, the book that I created was a vision of how we could create a sustainable, organic civilization that would be fair and thrilling for everybody, for not a generation or two, not 100 or 200 years, but for the rest of the life of humanity, basically for thousands of years. That's what I really wanted to do. And I feel it's time to do it. And you can see with the crises, with the planet burning up,
Oh,
with democracy and all these other things that we're frightened about. And you can see one of the amazing things that I've read, just a little statistic, you may know it already, but did you know that 90% of humanity right now has one of these things in their pocket?
wow. 90 already.
90% has a smartphone. And that means that all these people all over the world have access to not only travel and weather information and maps and all that kind of stuff, but access to health information,
Yeah.
access to the greatest books that have ever been written, the greatest thinking that's ever been done, to the greatest art that's ever been done, to the greatest music that's ever been accomplished. All of that in their pockets, everybody.
Yeah.
What if this device shared only the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Wouldn't we be able, as a democracy, which is one of the great things
Yeah.
that we've also invented, wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't we be able to make the right decisions if we had all that information right there? We'd read it and think ourselves and come up with what we think is right. And so anyway, that I've wandered a bit away, but the golden civilization is something that would be sustainable and doable. And that's what my book, A Golden Civilization and the Map of Mindfulness, is all about.
Well, I have read the book recently, and it has really landed just wonderfully for me. I think some of the concepts that you describe in the book, um, like I was saying earlier, they really have taken me to another place. Understanding, really being able to put a name on a few things like self-knowledge,
Yeah.
like entrepreneurial spirit. Really, can you talk a little bit about entrepreneurial spirit? Can you talk about how you labeled it and kind of what it is for you, what it is, and how you envision that being part of this golden civilization?
Yeah. So I see a world that is filled with entrepreneurial spirit. That's the vision in the golden civilization. And it's filled by that. I mean, it's got 8 billion people, all of them, whew, on fire
Yeah.
with entrepreneurial energy. And we all live it in different ways. Some of us live it in compassionate ways with our kids, primarily. Some of us are in our gardens doing it. Others of us are inventing new things. Some of us are learning how to do our task better and then sharing it with others.
Yeah.
What's incredible, what's been stunning, and I came up with the term because I mean, freedom's a huge word for me, and I
Yeah.
use it everywhere. And freedom is one of the words that has been taken over by politics in one way or another,
Mm.
and means certain things that it's not really. I don't think it really encompasses everything. And I think freedom is something extraordinary, that every human being was born to be free. And it's not about some of us that have being free and we'll try and help all the rest of you get up there somehow. No, every one of us is meant to live a life of freedom. And it's out of that life of freedom that our great vitality and energy, the freshness of our mind, intermingling with our authenticity of knowing who we are, that self-knowledge piece, that intermingling and the energy that comes out of that is entrepreneurial. And now we think of, I think I was reading that maybe there are 500,000, is that right? I can't remember that. There's some number that people put to how many
Oh,
entrepreneurs there really are in the world. And of course we think, and we just think maybe there's a dozen with all those people accumulating billions and billions of dollars. But each one of us has that energy.
right.
Let's call it into life. And so I thought I used the term entrepreneurial and I used the term freedom on purpose in a way that is much larger than how the political spirit or the economic spirit of the day tends to use them. Entrepreneurial energy is not meant to be, bottled up and only funneled through Harvard Business School
Yeah.
and hedge funds and venture capital and private equity. Entrepreneurial spirit, if we're to have an incredible civilization of enormous growth, we want to free everybody. That's where growth is really going to take off, is as we free everybody.
Yeah, we're each unique individuals with a unique contribution
Right,
to our communities, to the world, to this golden civilization.
right,
Yeah. And I also love part of your vision of a golden civilization is that every human being gets life planned.
right. Yeah, yeah.
What I mean, that really I when you think about that, you think all the uniqueness all over the globe that is sitting untapped and how that could really drive this amazing growth, amazing golden civilization. Loved that concept, which obviously folds into the golden civilization, to think about the institutions and the governments and everything that don't necessarily think about fiduciary duty in the same way that we do.
Right.
And I really thought that this message would resonate with our community here in Sonoma County and our client community. And
Mm,
I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about your idea of this fiduciary in all things.
mm,
And what can we do as citizens, as activists, to try and get this message out?
mm. Great. Wonderful, Rawson. Would it be all right if I set the frame for this and go
Please.
back just a bit to the thoughts about a golden civilization?
Yeah.
So, when you hear the notion of a golden civilization, at first you think, pie in the sky, never happened. Look at what's happening in politics. That's utopian. And so you dismiss it, and you dismiss it and we live in a world where we're filled with cynicism
Yeah.
about the possibility of good things happening. It's actually, I think of it as a disease, the cynicism, although
Mm.
we just take it as a way of life and we create a lot of humor around it and we live with it. Let me share the frame of the golden civilization in a way that I think your community that you're talking about in Sonoma County would understand, and particularly because throughout California, you've had some of the great, enormous um, technological developments, the freedoms coming from technology that have just been astonishing for all of us in the last 50 years or so. So let me back up just a minute to the golden civilization. So we've had 250 years since the Industrial Revolution of explosive growth, just incredible. Look at us speaking, a couple
Right?
thousand miles a year away, and here we are talking to each other, different time zones, all that kind of stuff. It's amazing, and all the things we can do. It just phenomenal. Health, longevity hasn't touched everybody in the world, but as I said, 90% of people
Yeah.
have a smartphone now. So the um, the question that came to me thinking about that and thinking about how we are sending these probes out into the solar
Mm.
system, into the universe, and thinking about how sophisticated that technology is. And the term that NASA uses for that sophisticated technology is the integrity of that
Yeah.
technology, right? Without
Yeah.
integrity, it just don't fly. Right? And so, and I thought, what a wonderful term. That this is what we really need in the golden civilization is great integrity.
Mm.
And if we can do that in our science and in our technology, who's to stop us from doing it in our politics and our economics? Let's make it happen. And that's just like, okay, so you go, all right, yeah, I see that. So how come we can't? What's going on? So when COVID hit, not only was I given the blessing of a little bit of long COVID, and I do view it as a blessing because it gave
Mm.
me this untapped energy beneath the fatigue,
Mm.
the passion. But I also had the time to reflect. I had been on a world tour for the Golden Civilization, gone to places in Asia. I had others go to Africa. I'd gone to Europe and Asia. We had people in Australia, people all over America, asking people, what does a golden civilization look like to you? And it was stunning that it looked like the same thing to
Yeah.
all these different people all over the world. So when COVID hit, I had to stop traveling, right? Like everybody else. I couldn't go around and do it in masks and travel all over the world. Nobody'd come, and I didn't really want to go. So I had this time to reflect. Is there a simpler path that I haven't completely identified? And I thought about this explosive growth and coming from these great these great corporations primarily. And I thought, how come that they can do all of that? Doesn't it make sense that after 250 years of enormous growth, that at the top of every hierarchy of power, that we would find the very best of humanity, right? Our wisdom and our compassion. Why wouldn't we? And for 250 years of growth, why isn't it there at the top of every hierarchy of power?
But it's
It's
not.
hard to find it at the top of any hierarchy,
Yeah.
right? And why isn't it there? And I thought, going back to economic thinking, I thought it's got to be something that's happening at the very base of our system, of something that's happening as corporations are being formed,
Hmm.
that they're being given a kind of directive, a permission to go in a particular direction and not another. Why is it that corporations don't act with the humanity that you might act or that I might act in relation to the planet or to people or to democracy? And I realized that we don't require anything of the sort from them,
Hmm.
that we give them all
Yeah.
this power. They've got this power. I know you're very interested in capital markets. We give them all this power of capital markets. We give them all this power to get enormous debt so they can suddenly be flooded with money. We give them power to have a freedom of speech that you or I can't imagine,
Yeah.
which I'm not sure is the healthiest thing. But we give them great power over media and with political contributions and all these things. What do we require of them? Some taxes, maybe.
Yeah.
And I thought maybe we should require them to be humane. So that was the idea. And I thought, what if we just did a single sentence at the basis? When you get incorporated, you have to sign on. There's a law that basically it's a single sentence that you have to say, yes, I swear to do this. And this is what it is. I'm just going to read it so I don't miss a word of it, because I think it's really important. So this is my single sentence, my one sentence legislative proposal. A fiduciary standard of obligation is required for all institutions, corporate, nonprofit, and governmental, to place the interests of all stakeholders, of truth, of humanity, democracy, and the living planet that sustains us, first, above their own self-interest. You and I know this because we swear on to a fiduciary standard
Yeah.
as a financial planner. And we place our clients' interests ahead of our own. Why shouldn't we require that of every corporate institution, including nonprofits? Because nonprofits can come off and just tell one version of the truth.
Right.
And as I said, one of the things I've learned is that we need to hold truth to a higher standard in all of our media, that the truth should mean the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And it doesn't mean that there aren't variations of interpretation, but the truth would be like a bell curve, where the top of the bell curve would be scientific or investigative reporting, or what used to be a standard, which is two people, different people corroborating a story. We don't have that right now. And if we had that layer of truth, and then certainly you have other opinions and other ideas, but they're of a lesser order. So the thought was, let's promote this. And you can go on my website and
Yeah.
see, I've got it there. I encourage people to use it on their Facebook headers. I've got some of the registered life planners in our community are using it on their signature page. We've got, when I say use it, I've got three logos in particular that I encourage people to use in their correspondence. Promote them through social media, and and I'm available to talk about it. And other
That's
people
great.
are as well. Yeah, to
That's
try and
great.
get the word out. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting when I think about my application in my work of the fiduciary standard, I'm very intentional about that,
Yeah.
very intentional. And I find that when I think about incentives, that my incentive is that I really bring the client closer to their dream of freedom. And that for me is the reward. And I
Excellent.
think that the incentives often with politics and corporations and such is not that. And it's, I don't know how we can try and realign those incentives to be more in the best interest, in the fiduciary interest of all
Yeah.
stakeholders, as you say.
Yeah. More humane, ultimately,
Yeah,
acting like a good human being.
yeah,
And why would we ever give power to an entity that isn't required to be a good human being? I don't get it.
yeah.
It's time to shift because we're clearly seeing too many global problems come up as a consequence of that level of power without that degree of responsibility.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you have mentioned a new book, and I am on your distribution list, so I got to read your little announcement last week. And congratulations on finishing that. And will you tell us a little bit about that? I can't wait to see this culmination of all of your life's work.
Yeah, it's a thrill. It's in a way it's a companion book to A Golden Civilization and the Map of Mindfulness. It's called The Three Domains of Freedom.
There's that freedom
And
again.
yeah, there you are. I can't get away from it. And then the trick to the book is in its subtitle. So you imagine three domains, the three domains of freedom, and then I list those three domains. So I'll just list the three
Yeah,
subtitles. The three domains of freedom. Each moment is yours. Your life is yours. Civilization is yours. And the notion here is that each moment is yours. That's something we've realized. The deeper we go into a mindfulness practice, one of my trick questions, you've probably seen me ask it, and I'll ask it to an audience of 1,000
yeah.
times, is have you ever experienced a moment of freedom in the past, And like walking the beach, making love, playing with your kids, designing something wildly creative? And I get everybody to raise their hand. I tell them it's a trick question, but I get everybody to raise their hand. And then I tell them they all got it wrong, right? We've never experienced a moment of freedom in the past. The only time we've ever experienced freedom is in the present moment.
Mhm.
The only moment we've ever experienced is the present moment.
Yeah,
Mindfulness, a great mindfulness practice, is about the mastery of the present moment. And it's about learning to find more and more in each moment an experience of freedom. So each moment is yours, first domain of freedom. Second domain of freedom, your life is yours. That's what you and I have been
yeah.
merely talking about here. It's life planning. Your life is yours. You shouldn't be running it the way your parents told you you should. You shouldn't be running it the way your spouse told you you should. You shouldn't be running it the way the government tells you you should, or your employer. Your life is yours.
What's that quote? Be yourself, everyone else is taken.
There you go. Beautiful. I love it. Wonderful. I wish I'd invented that. Wonderful quote. Yeah. And then the third one is the one, I mean, we get these first two because life planning has become to be an active engagement that's happening around the world, and mindfulness certainly is written about a lot. The third one, civilization is yours. We've almost forgotten it because we don't do civics classes anymore in our
Yeah,
school, and we don't really think about democracy as being something that is ours. We more think that we're put upon in some way by the powers that be, whoever they are. But that the design of democracy is meant to be ours. And so I'm very active this year, for instance. 2024 feels like a huge time for civilization, a huge year here
yeah,
in America. And so I'm going to be very active because I think it could be not only the most important year in
yeah.
human history, but it could be an incredible year
Yeah.
in human history. I want to try and help make that happen.
It's nice to hear the optimism. We hear so often the pessimism. So it's nice to hear that optimistic spirit.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. So we hadn't planned really to talk about the map of mindfulness at all, but if you will indulge me, I really just on the personal side, it the illustrations really hit me,
Yeah.
and they were part of really what I was saying earlier, that kind of has taken me to a whole nother level. And this idea of the present moment, and that everything virtuous is underneath, just waiting for you and your entrepreneurial spirit to rise up and come out. And that really is just it's been wonderful.
Whew.
Yeah.
That's a thrill to hear for me, Rawson. Thank you so much for sharing and for your dedication to understand it. It's not an easy concept at first because we're
No,
yeah, right? Yeah,
no, it took me some time. I bought the book and I went, oh, I don't know about this. I'm not ready for that. And then a couple of years later, I came back and here I was ready for it.
yeah, yeah. I try to talk about it everywhere I go and to show an image of it. I
Yeah,
don't have an
I
image
have
right here.
it.
Yeah, you've got it in your book. Uh,
Yeah,
maybe show one of the ones that you like in particular. There are a whole bunch of them in
I
the
know
civilization book.
there are.
Um, but so you'll see that it has a time and space kind of at the top. Maybe go toward
Mhm.
the end of the of that first section of the
Yeah,
book.
I got it.
Of the
Now I have to
mindfulness
get the
section.
glasses on.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. Well, this is the conscious universe one.
There you go. All right, cool. And lower the book just a bit because there you want the whole thing. So there you have it. And the top oval is time and space. It's like the grid. It's a Cartesian grid. That's easy to analyze, wonderful for science. It's also where we put all our stories of ourselves. It's our history and our projections of the future, our history of the past. And but it's only the present moment we've ever experienced.
Yeah.
And this was the astonishing thing that I realized. And I said, wow, that map is all wrong. Where's the present moment in that top oval? It's
Yeah,
not there. It's so ephemeral. And so, if the present moment's the only thing we've really experienced, shouldn't it be the center of a map
yeah.
of the universe, of how the universe operates? And so I designed this, and the
What is
inspiration for
this?
it came from. There's another one. Here we go. Yeah, there you go. And you see going down. You see down at the base. You see virtues and great spirit and rest and inner peace and spaciousness, and also self-knowledge. And there's also this development of selflessness happening down there.
Yeah,
And it's incredible, and it's driven by the our relationship to that present moment.
yeah,
So right now, for most of us, we are awake some of the time, and wow, isn't this cool? And but a lot of the time, we're like, what was I just saying? And how did I get here? And we're driven by our responsibilities or our to-do lists or our text messages or our emails. We're driven, and there's what I call, I think of the present moment as being a mirror of either awakening
hmm,
or of forgetfulness.
yeah,
And how do we wake up? How do we get it? Because if it's of awakening, then we can make the top oval into a golden civilization, into something really significant and wonderful, rich. And if we're constantly reactive, well, you've got kind of wars, and you've got divorce, and you've got,
yeah,
just driven by material things, and just thinking, and no feeling, no heart, no
yeah,
spirit. So one of the secrets of mindfulness and meditative work is that and mindfulness in particular, mindfulness is primarily a focus on the present moment. It's hard to be there because it goes so quickly, right? But it's a constant returning to the present moment. And as we do that, we're letting go of all of our self-thoughts, of all of our cravings and our pushings away, and we're letting go of all that. And so we're cultivating selflessness at the same time that we're cultivating the energy of the present moment. That's extraordinary, because selflessness we think of as being very peaceful, being deep, spiritual perhaps. And the present moment is more alert and energized. Well, you're cultivating both of those in a great mindfulness practice. That's amazing. And your description, Rawson, is one of the best I've heard from outside the book, of course. But but it's, the virtue is at the base, that when you let go of the self as you're practicing mindfulness, you're going down to that bottom half of the map of mindfulness. And down there is the realm of selflessness, of virtue, of kindness, of generosity, of courage, of peace, of spirit. And so the more that you practice a mindfulness type of practice, you get both that energy and you get this richness of goodness, basically, coming up. That's what we want, and that's what we need for a sustainable civilization.
I feel with your funnel, the closer I get to that present moment, like I'm swirling down, then all of the noise just starts to reduce, and it becomes more focused and more focused.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah.
One of my favorite practices, and it's where I mentioned that I really, I think of my legacy as often being the poetry and photography that I have now put into six books, but they're all about how to practice mindfulness in nature and experience the present moment in nature. What a wonderful thing to live in California.
Yeah.
I often thought, I spent a lot of time in Hawaii and then a lot of time in Massachusetts and sometime over in London as well. But I often thought in the early days after I discovered Hawaii, because then I bought a home over there, and I often thought, gosh, if I'd discovered California before I discovered Hawaii, I might have just lived in one place. Wouldn't that have been cool? But anyway, you've got wonderful nature there. And so, every moment is changing in it. So it's delivering us into the present moment all the time.
Well, thank you, George. And thank you for sharing your aloha with me. And it's wonderful what you've done for the financial community, but it's also wonderful the perseverance that you've had to bring your message of freedom and of this golden civilization to as many people as possible. And I hope that I can help get your message out there.
Thank you so much, Rawson. So cool. Wonderful to really meet you. And I look forward to in person at some point.
It was a pleasure and an honor to speak with George Kender. He's been a visionary his whole life, and we in the financial planning community have reaped the rewards. If you're interested in exploring the work of George Kender, his books, poetry, and big ideas further, you can find links to all of that at georgekender.com.